So back to a few reasons of why you want to even do this in the first place. The subpoena requests, the law enforcement agencies rely, these are always being changed, but essentially now they're up to 5 or 7 years. You're expected to store that much and have it be available pretty quickly if a law enforcement agency came in and said, I need the numbers for this number. So that would be the equivalent of saying, I know you've got a 10,000 decks of cards, but I need all the 3 of spades between 7 years ago and 6 years ago. It's typically not a good idea to say, oh, yeah, well, I've got all this here, it's in the back office, I'll go find it and come back to me, officer, in a few months or something, because we've had customers actually be threatened with contempt of court of all things. You're expected to have this stuff and be able to turn it around pretty quickly. There's a chain of custody issue too, which is, I didn't mention this before, but you want to be able to store the very, very raw data on here, because if it's ever going to be held up in a court of law or something, it's got to be as close to what was generated on the switch, not some third generation processed out of billing record. They want to go back to what was actually done on the switch, kind of a chain of custody of data, okay? The authenticity of the original messages counts, and as I mentioned, the target position. Operationally speaking, we tend to forget that our customers are part of a vast test network, right? And we sometimes do things that where we make our manual test calls, we send out truck rolls to do things where we actually have, in some cases, thousands and thousands of unwilling customers or unwilling testers already. The case, one case we did with a customer was sort of interesting. They were on the island of Puerto Rico. They had a team of 2 or 3 testers that went around in vans and took microvolt readings to determine at every point in the island where they were getting a strong signal and where they were getting a weak signal. And they didn't find all the problems, but they did occasionally find it. As it turns out, given that this particular customer had about 1 million customers on the island constantly making calls, the same call detail record I showed you a while back had buried in it what happened at the end of the call. That's one of the many things. Remember now, the switches are just spitting out verbally everything that's happening on the call. Well, one of the things that's in there is, did the customer push end on the wireless call, or did the call drop? So when they realized that, they said, you know what we want to do is be able to take a look at all our records and see which cell sites we're getting the most dropped calls on. Because cell site and reason for the call ending are all on the phone record. And they connected that to a database of latitude and longitude, knowing exactly where the cell site was. We helped them put this together, and they said, we had no idea that on the western part of the island, out by a town called Mayaways, there's actually a university right here. And the trucks that rolled by in August, everything was fine. September, school's back in session, there's a lot more drop calls, right? I'm sure you can relate to that here. So they said, haha, okay, well, we're going to send our trucks out there tomorrow. Thank you very much. So operationally, there's a lot to be gathered too from this, right? We were really tickled pink, by the way, when we were putting all this together, and we said, oh, how do we know that's really the spot and everything? Well, we clicked on Google Maps, switched to satellite view, drilled down, and there we could see the mountaintop with the tower right on top. So we knew we were right at the cell site tower that the big data was pointing us to. Something else I'd urge you to consider in our hyper-competitive market here is fair value. What is a fair value for a customer to be paying for your services? We know from heavy analytics that there's a usage DNA that forms for everybody, and we know that if the fair value is high relative to what they're actually paying, there's an opportunity to upsell. We know that if the fair value is low, meaning they're not using much of your services, they're not a good candidate to upsell. You should probably either let sleeping dogs lie or reach out to them proactively because they're a churn risk. If you believe the notion that consumption should match revenues, then the next couple slides will make sense to you as well. We took a look at a wireless carrier and ignored everybody who wasn't generating at least, say, $65 of revenue. And no surprise, the number of people paying out here drops precipitously as you go each dollar up, right? If you were to plot just take a dump from your billing billing systems and say, how many people am I getting at each dollar of revenue? Your graph, I'm sure, would look something like this. Or maybe, well, we've cut off half of it. It would look like a bell curve, right? Where you have people clustering around a median, and you have some people who spend very low, and some people who spend very high. But wouldn't it be nice to know if the people who are paying you the most are the people that are using the most? If you don't believe that, you're going to have a problem, right? Because we expect traffic to look like a nice straight line here. It says customers who use less should be paying less, and customers who use more, all else being equal, should be paying more. And I'm not talking here about friends and family plans and bundling and that sort of thing. But there's all kinds of ifs, ands, and buts to that. But you want to essentially be thinking about this. So it would be compelling to show if we said how much are people being billed versus how much are they being paid. And we would expect to see a pretty nice solid line in math terms that's highly correlated, right? What do we see? We don't see that. If you think of this as being, again, the amount being paid on the last bill is up here, and the amount that's been used is up here. If everything clustered tightly around that right size line, you would say that all your customers were right sized to the right plan. But what we tend to see is that you have people that are way out here, upper left, and way out here in the bottom right. And if you're using a one-size-fits-all marketing strategy to say, we're the lowest cost provider, or if you sign up for this package, where you pay a little bit more and you get a lot more. If you're thinking that that's going to apply to everybody equally, this kind of graph should give you pause for thought, because it probably won't. By the way, we talked about the people that are using big data the most, people like Amazon, the retail company. Yeah, they've clued into this too, right? They've figured out that I miss our little local bookstore, our bookseller, but they figured out that they can tell as much about what your next book is that you're going to buy based on your past buying habits and what other people have bought. That they can make predictions, right, about what's going to be there. So they're targeting their message. They're not buying ad space in the Super Bowl saying, go and buy this book. Right? They're targeting their message every time you go to their website with what they think you're going to want. And there's a huge opportunity, in our opinion, for the telecom industry to start doing the same thing with their phone records and looking at their usage this way. So if you think about it just loosely, right, you have the upsell opportunities here in the top left. The people that are spending $20 a month, say here, let's take this dot right here. This is somebody who's paying $20 a month but using over, this is some kind of index, but let's say making 3,000 calls a month, using a lot of broadband, they're a heavy, heavy user. That's the kind of person that you might say, you know what, we'd like to move you into this plan and we won't charge you anymore. We'd like to move you a little bit over to the right here, bring you up a little bit, but you won't get overages next month. If you made that same pitch to somebody over here, right? Remember, this is a person who's paying a lot to you already, but they're using very little. You call them up on the phone and say, now I got a deal for you. We're going to charge you $10 more a month, and stop right there, right? You're going to say, I hardly use your service anyway. I don't want to spend $1 more a month. In fact, you've kind of reminded me I should go shopping around and see what else is out there. And there very well may be a competitor who's onto this, and this is the kinds of things that big guys are using, the AT&Ts and the Verizons, and they are doing this to your customers. They're saying, how can we poach customers that we perceive are a churn risk in our competitors? So it gives you an opportunity to get out in front of that curve and say, I want to know where every customer is right now on this matrix, and are they priced right? Because though it may pain you to move this customer down, right? That seems like kind of shooting yourself in the foot, right? In the short term anyway, to call them up and say, Madam, I don't think you're on the right plan. You're paying us $90 a month. We have this great plan over here that's $40 a month. We're going to right size you. Probably wouldn't use those terms, but right. What we tend to see is that discount that pain you take up front more than pays for itself later, because that person becomes much less of a churn risk. And there's a lot of data to back that up as well. The people who are down here are halfway gone. Okay. So that's fair billing, and we can come back and talk about this a little bit more if we'd like this time at the end. But it's something that just one thing here that I would urge you to think about would be as you move towards big data, even on your private cloud or on your public cloud, it doesn't matter. You start to think about capturing all the data that you can, and you start to think about these issues. The subpoena and the KTA federal enforcement stuff is kind of the easy stuff because you're looking for that needle in the haystack, and you'll be glad you have all this computing power to do it when you need it. You'll get through those a lot faster. But the real areas where you can impact your business, I think, are in this type of thing. So I've mentioned in passing that these people, that you have a few that are right size, you have upsell opportunities on this side of the curve, you have churn risk down here. Let's take a look at the churn a little bit closer because that's an item that's on everybody's mind.